Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone, my name is Nisrina Afifah and I'm going to present my final term paper entitled The Background of Implementation of Game Theory in Accounting Fields. What is game theory? According to Wikipedia, game theory is the study of mathematical models of strategic interaction among rational decision makers. Game theory has been applied in various kinds of fields of social science, logic, systems science, and computer science. At the first place, game theory addressed zero-sum games, in which each participant's gain or losses are exactly balanced by those of the other participants. Today, game theory applies to a wide range of very behavioral relations and is now an umbrella term for the science of logical decision-making in humans, animals, and computers. An accounting phenomenon, as the financial statements are expected to provide information to investors and creditors in decision-making process related to economic decisions, stakeholders such as investors often use companies' profit to measure corporate performance. If there is a condition where the management didn't successfully achieve the specified profit target, then the management will rationally take advantage of the flexibility allowed by the accounting standard in preparing financial statements to modify the financial statements. Management is naturally motivated to show the good performance in generating value or the maximum profit. That is why management tends to select and apply accounting methods that can provide a better information. The phenomenon described can be explained by agency theory. This theory is one of the branch of game theory. The agency relationship arises when one or more persons, or in this case the principal, hire another person, in this case is the agent, to provide a service and then delegate decision-making authority to the agent. Based on the Jensen and McLean in Priantina 2000. Agency relationship is a contractual relationship where the managers who run the company's operations have information advantages compared to the principal. Therefore, managers more aware of internal and prospect information in the future than the owners or shareholders. In these conditions, the manager should provide a signal about the state of the company to the owner or shareholder. However, the information is not always provided with the actual conditions of the company. This condition is known as asymmetric information, based on Harris 2014 in Priantina 2013. Conflicts among manager, shareholder, or agent principal above can be modeled as a game because decisions required by the different constituents may not be similar. Shareholders will want financial statement information relevant and reliable in assessing the expected value and the risk of their investment. Managers are not always willing to reveal all the information needed by the investors. Managers also prefer to not reveal all of the accounting policies used to manage reported earnings by changing accounting policies when necessary. A conflict between management and principals with different interests and attempt to maximize expected utility between the parties will lead to asymmetry of information. The interaction between these two parties to maximizing their expected utility can be modeled as a game according to game theory. For now, we can say that game theory is used to analyze decision-making and strategy of each player performed in a conflict. Models in game theory is the interaction of two or more players. These interactions occur in the presence of uncertainty and information asymmetry. This makes game theory is felt suitable for the underlying conflict between the agent principal are often caused by the emergence of information asymmetry, where the conditions often occur in the setting of accounting phenomena. This study aimed to explore how is the game theory being tools in accounting field in order to help evaluate and develop the disciplines. It will later discuss about early development of game theory, as the origin problem will help us to match the reason why game theory became adapted into accounting fields. After that, by explaining the concept of game theory until it became a tool used to analyze the interaction among the economic parties. Game theory began to develop extensively in the 1950s. It then applied explicitly to biology in the 1970s. Nowadays, game theory has been widely recognized as an important tool in many fields. While the academic discipline and the field itself was only formally established in the 1950s, but the game theory-like insights are clearly visible far before. We will review the history of development of the game history in the further sections. The game theory history. Before 1950s, where the game theory was intensively developed, the basis of game theory is attributed to the following works. The first is Augustine Carnot's researches into the mathematical principles of the theory of wealth. The second is Francis Zidro Edgeworth's mathematical physics, Emily Borel's algebra and calculus probabilities. These works are mainly talk about effort to map human behavior using math. Each of these were briefly peek into the future of game theory. Neumann and Nash. It is widely accepted that modern analysis began with John von Neumann and was further provided its methodological framework by John Nash. It is because game theory didn't exist by name until John von Neumann first published the paper on the theory of game strategy, 1928. This paper vastly pushed forward the field. The paper is success to make it understandable by reviewing the proposed fundamental theorem of game theory. The fundamental theorem of game theory states that in a broad category of two-person games, it's always possible to find an equilibrium from which neither player should deviate unilaterally. Such equilibrium exists in any two-person game that satisfies the following criteria. The first is the game is finite. The second, the game is one of complete information. The third is it is a zero-sum game. The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior, published in 1944 by John von Neumann and economist Oscar Morgenstern, is considered the groundbreaking text that officially established game theory as an interdisciplinary research field. According to Najera, 2019, John Nash claimed to game theory fame came from expanding Neumann's previously defined two-person game equilibrium. Known as Nash equilibrium and applicable to a much wider variety of games, Nash proved that every vignette and player in a non-zero sum, or not just two-player zero sum, has a clearly defined optimal strategy. Under Neumann and Nash, game theory spread over to many industry and scientific fields. In early 1950s, intensive development impact on massive progress to further development. The prisoner's dilemma. As the most reviewed classic game theory problem, the prisoner's dilemma is a standard example of a game analyzed in game theory that shows why two completely rational individuals might not cooperate, even if it appears that it is in their best interest to do so. We can simply understand the theory by discussing the following example. Two members of a criminal gang are arrested and imprisoned. Each prisoner is in solitary confinement with no means of communicating with the other. The prosecutors lack sufficient evidence to convict the pair on the principal charge, but they have enough to convict both on a lesser charge. Simultaneously, the prosecutors offers each prisoner a bargain. Each prisoner is given the opportunity either to betray the other by testifying that the other committed the crime, or to cooperate with the other by remaining silent. The possible outcomes are: the first possible outcomes is if A and B each betray the other of them, serve 2 years in prison. The second is if A betrays B but B remains silent, A will be set free and B will serve 3 years in prison. The third is if A remains silent but B betrays A will serve 3 years in prison and B will be set free. The last is if A and B both remain silent, both of them will serve only 1 year in prison or on the lesser charge. You can also see from the matrix here in a slide. If we're looking for this example, we can understand that prisoners will have no opportunity to reward or punish their partner, but indeed his action will impact their partner's punishment status. By looking the matrix, the prisoners can understand that betraying a partner offers a greater reward than cooperating with him. All purely rational, self-interested prisoners will betray the other, meaning the only possible outcome for two purely rational prisoners is for them to betray each other. The game theory concept in accounting field. Now I want to explain how game theory concept being implemented in accounting field. The first is game theory is about theory of human decision-making behavior. It is now we can underlie various issues in financial accounting theory using game theory concept. These issues often deliberate agent-principal conflict, as both managers and principal has their own interest to maximize their benefit, while agent as a main activity runner have benefit to inside information, which become their option to communicate it or not communicate it, the specific part, to consider the risk they will get. If we let it happen, the end result will be the asymmetry information, which for specific, the principal will not get the information they actually need. And then we analyze the decision and strategies made by each player in a conflict. The model in a game theory is an interaction of two or more players. This interaction arises in the presence of uncertainty and the information asymmetry. This makes game theory feel suitable for underlying conflicts between agent-principal, which are often caused by information asymmetry in an accounting field. And then, the action one player chooses will depend on what action the player thinks about what the other player thinks, and vice versa. In addition to the uncertainty that comes from realization of natural conditions, there's also uncertainty resulting from the actions of players that have to be taken into account by other players in order to making decision. Actions taken by other players can be very difficult to predict because the action one player chooses will depend on what action the player thinks about what the other player thinks, and vice versa. Asymmetry information based in game theory implementation. A large number of problems in the corporate environment are characterized by the interaction between agents and principals in which there is information asymmetry. In asymmetric information, there is one player who knows something while the other party doesn't know the information. In the principal-agent relationship, the agent is a player who knows information related to the condition of the company because he is an internal party in the company. Meanwhile, the principal is a player who doesn't know information that is not known by the agent. This problem can be explained using agency theory. Agency theory is a type of cooperative game theory that models contracts between managers and owners of business entities. In the case of agency theory, there is an implication that net income plays a role in motivating and monitoring managers' performance. The non-cooperative model may provide insight into conflicts of interest between different groups of users of accounting information. So far, We have seen in a lot of literature and research that agency theory is often a big umbrella for theoretical framework used in accounting. It is because agency theory helps us to analyze how people making decisions, and so we can establish such frameworks to regulate the conflicted parties. As a cooperative type of game theory, the use of agency theory is not necessarily appropriate for every interaction context in the accounting field. Instead of accommodating the phenomena that occur, agency theory is often forced to use it. For this reason, a study to retract the theory underlying the accounting phenomenon to underlying theory is necessary. Planning in strategic situations requires careful thought before acting. We must take into account that what we think of the other party we interact with also thinks about that interaction and planning. Because this type of thinking is quite complex, we need analytical tools with the aim of explaining behavior and predicting outcomes in these strategic situations. For this purpose, we need game theory. The game theory practice in financial accounting. In terms of managing contract, according to Canodia 2014, the accounting process alters the strategic interaction amongst agents by impinging on their incentives and on the contract they make to bind their behavior. Thus, the new literature approaches the design of measurement rules and accounting processes in a fundamentally different way. The emphasis is more on contracting and incentives and the control of human behavior than on the recording and analysis of ex-post data or financial report. Since then, game theory started to apply on accounting fields. Using game theory concept, accountants have worked on the design of performance measures and contracts to alleviate moral hazards and collusion among agents. The literature on the ex-post investigation of accounting variances has been replaced by the ex-ante control of agents through stochastic monitoring. Issues of participatory budgeting have been addressed from the perspective of inducing thoughtful sharing of information and fine-tuning of incentive contracts. What does it mean by ex-ante control? Is the control done in the first of activities. It is done before the activities is over, different from the audit of financial report that is commonly used to evaluate the activities after the activities is finished. It is categorized as ex post. There is main condition for implementing game theory based on Curiel 1997 and Pratina 2013. There are two main conditions for implementing game theory. The first is there are two or more entities. The second, any compensation received by the entity is dependent on decisions made by the entity and other entities. In example, there is interdependence between compensation. And then, in game theory, the number of players, which is greater than one, but small enough to analyze the actions of one player affecting another player, so that the conflict aspect of the game where the player takes the action of the other player's actions can be taken into account. In game theory, there are several types of games. One of the bases that can be used to classify is cooperative games and non-cooperative games. In a cooperative game, parties can enter into a mutually binding agreement. If the agreement is not possible, then the game that might emerge is a non-cooperative game. Single person and multiple person decision making. In the context of one-man decision making, we have a tendency to aim for better defined problem management, such as maximization of the objective function to some extent. While this problem will be difficult to solve in a practical manner, it will not raise a conceptual issue. The meaning of optimal decisions in this very clear that we only find one. Problems will arise if we are in the context of interaction with several people. One thing can be done regarding this conceptual issue is to define the problem before we start to solve the existing problem. Determining the concept of a solution and then investigating the properties of the solution, in general as a broad framework in a specific model of various application areas. Game theory is a theory that was originally built and developed through mathematical analysis. For the information, game theory is lying on the branch of the mathematics, specifically in applied mathematics. Accounting setting phenomena in accounting is often an interaction between parties who have an interest in an economic decision-making process. This has the potential to cause conflict, which can be observed using the branch of game theory, named agency theory. The game theory began to extensively develop by many scholars in 1950s. Even so, it is widely accepted that modern analysis began with John von Neumann and was further provided as methodological framework by John Nash. As the most reviewed classic game theory problem, the prisoner's dilemma shows us that by observing another party's behavior through any possible outcome that might be happened, we can yield better decision or at least achieve win-win solution for both parties. In asymmetric information, the agent is a player who knows information related to the condition of the company because he is an internal party in the company. Meanwhile, the principal is a player who doesn't know information that is not known by the agent. It will then analyze using agency theory, which one of the branch of game theory. This has become the background of implementing the game theory in accounting. So accounting can establish the more sophisticated standard in order to regulate conflict between the parties, such as agent-principal conflict. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.